My local Harbor Freight had a sale where these Prybars were about $1.50. I don't exactly remember. I snatched 4 of them because if you notice, they got about a foot of metal in there that you can make a knife out of. In this segment, I'm going to show you how not only did I see it and identify that it could make a good knife, but I want to show you the process of how it became a knife. Some critical knowledge and thinking comes in hand, right? A prybar is meant to do what? Pry, and it's pretty hard, right? We're going to take it, and it's not because it's an anvil, it's because it's actually hard and tempered. So what we're going to do is we're going to strip some of this coating off, we're going to cut a little segment off it, and heat it up, quench it, and see what we're dealing with, and if it's even compatible to make a knife, and see if I'm right. But we don't really have to do all that, right? We have a file, which we know it's hardened, right? And we have our piece of metal, mystery piece of metal. Let's say we go to the junkyard and we're grab a piece of metal. It doesn't give us the best, but definitely skates. So we know it's able to be hardened. This side, on the other hand, doesn't bite too much. But that's right. We are assuming that this $2 piece of metal, right, is made from a singular piece of metal. It wouldn't really make sense for a company to take mild steel, forge welded, seamlessly blended, of course, then shape it, then quench it. So what I believe this will yield is that they take one flat piece of moderate high carbon steel, 1075, 1085, definitely not 1095, and shape it, quench it at the ends, and that's how we get the Prybar. I won't waste your time showing you how I cut it, because you know, then if you're listening in headphones or something, it'll be loud. But we're using a grinder with also a Harbor Freight cutting wheel. And remember, safety first. You see my glasses and shoes. Make sure you are safe. Another aspect that is giving really good hints that this is good steel, high carbon particularly, and not mild, is when you're cutting through it. When you've cut quite a bit of metal, you know what it feels like to cut through mild steel versus cutting through carbon steel. And when you're cutting through spring steel and 5160, you know, all those other ones, you will be able to tell very quickly. This feels pretty good on the aspect. I cut it pretty high up in the spectrum of where it would have been quenched. And the structure gives me good hints. What we're going to do is we're going to grind the paint off. Probably not. We're just going to burn it off in the forge. And then we're going to quench it at red hot and see if it tempers. So I understand not everybody has a forge, right? But I started out using one of these. There's plenty of videos how to make a mini forge, how to be able to temper things, etc. If you take 2 of these for the low price of $15 each, not particularly this one, but the other ones that you don't like self-light, you could definitely get metal to very red hot, or at least enough to quench it and be able to tell. We'll be placing our piece of metal in our sacrificial forge. Our piece of metal, or test subject, right, mystery metal, is in the forge heating up. So we will be quenching it in water. Why water and why not oil? Well, water will cool it much quicker and will give us, if it cracks, hey, we know it's hardenable, right? And if we're quenching in oil, we want a much milder temper, slower, etc., right? We will not actually be tempering it per se, we'll just be quenching it and testing for hardness. If we quench and test for hardness and there is no hardness, well, we know that we should be making a knife out of this metal. So we are getting somewhat ready. We can tell by the colors, but how do we know by color? I'm colorblind, so mostly at least. So how could I really be able to tell? Well, there's shades of colors and stuff like that, but I use the trusty magnet, also from Harbor Freight. So what I do is I just give it a little poke. Hi, chickens. I give it a little poke, and if it does not stick to the magnet, it's ready to be quenched. I like to put my magnet on the anvil so it sticks out, right? And then I can just quickly grab it out of the forge, give it a rubby, and then quench. So we're ready. Here we go. And we quench. The moment of truth. We have our quenched piece of metal, and it's actually sounding pretty good. It sounds like we are hardened. It's skating pretty well. And let me show you what a non-hardened piece of metal would sound like. This is part of a jig that I made to hold an engine up, and it's mild steel. And you kind of hear how, well, you would feel that it grabs, but it definitely does not skate similar to the anvil. It sounds different, so our quench was successful, so we're going to continue finding out if this will make a good knife. We trimmed the other end, and just to show you that we're not kidding, right? You see the Pittsburgh, right? We're going to remove the black paint coating. Looks like powder coating, honestly, because it's actually decently thick, too. Then we're going to come up with a good design and figure out where we go from here. Our next step, as you hear the forge running, is to anneal it, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to bring it to a decent temperature where we would destroy the previous tempering, right? And relax the metal. So when we're working with it, it's not too hard and tempered, and we can take away more material and be more effective with our tools. Due to the cost, right, of this tool, we are inferring that we do not have multi-quenching process in the manufacturing of this Prybar, right? Because theoretically speaking, the best way to do it would be having, you know, quench this side and then quench the other one. It's unlikely. They probably actually quenched the whole thing. And I cut decently close to the middle, right, just to check it out. And yeah, indeed, it was all hardened throughout. So if you are at home and you don't have a forge, which is perfectly fine, what you can do is you can heat it up with your torches, which we spoke about earlier, and hold it in a bucket of sand, right? Or put it in a bucket of sand once you feel like it's been heated enough. What we're gonna do is we're gonna let it cool in the forge overnight, maybe a few until it's actually like tactile. We want to slowly release the stress from the metal so we can machine it much easier. Now, another thing that you can do is if you have access to it, I don't, and I'd rather not use it because a lot of it was kind of like cancerous, is vermiculite. Vermiculite is kind of a controversial one. You can find it in horticulture and gardening. It'll do the same thing that the sand does. Luckily, the forge is recently insulated, and we can let it cool off in there. But there is options. If you don't have sand for some mysterious reason, it's like $5 at Home Depot, and a bucket next to the sand will also be $2 or $3. You could use dirt. I'm sure that it's been done, and I'm sure it would work because it has great insulating properties, and it will be significantly softer than prior to. Cleaned up quite a bit of it, at least the paint, so we're going to actually draw on it. Things when you want to keep in mind when you're making a knife, right? Keep in mind that if you don't have a very aggressive tool like a belt grinder, it's going to be difficult to remove that metal with a hand file. So we want to take advantage of how much stock there is. So instead of making a very thin fillet knife out of this big billet of metal, we might as well just make a nice thick bushcraft knife, right? We have one of the traditional knives that we usually make, right? So I want to show you that this is something that I will probably use. Regarding the handle, we want the ricotta somewhere around here, maybe a little bit aft, so we'll put a little X, right? We're going to keep in mind that the thickness and the size, we want to take advantage of all this stuff. So we're going to give it a little belly. Let's keep that in mind. Naturally, we have a little curve, right? We're not going to do 2 dips, but one of the reasons why I do this dip in general is because my belt grinder has the wheel to accommodate for that. We have to compensate for the fact that the handle will be made out of wood and it's going to be heavier. So we have blade, which is going to be significantly thicker, but go away. We have this right here. We'll do a nice little lanyard hole. We'll do our pins somewhat right here. And right here, and we'll see how that goes. It's not an exact science. If you want to do a tanto, if you want to do a recurve, a kukri, something, right? I'll do it by all means. This is just a easy shape, right, that most people can do, and the most utilized shape, right? We have a nice little knife we can throw in our backpack and go camping with. We're not going to war with a kukri or a dagger or something. But now thinking about it, this would make a pretty good dagger if I really thought about it, because it's pretty thick. But we're gonna actually stick to them. I do have a few more of these, so maybe they'll become daggers. I don't know. So I'm gonna be using the angle grinder. You see all my safety equipment on. We're gonna be cutting the tail off and the tip off. The middle can just be grinded down with a normal stone. Remember, we want a ricasso, so what we're going to do is we're going to take the end grinder and make a nice little slit right here and be able to file down with a rat tail tang file. Another great tip that I would like to give is if you don't really feel comfortable with angle grinders, these blades, which are about $10-15 depending, right, are very safe. They don't shatter. Sometimes the smaller ones will shatter. Currently, I cannot find my rat tail file, so we will definitely go out and buy one and figure out how to make that ricasso. See, the footage is not going to be there, but I did use the angle grinder with a flat wheel to give some of the shape that we have right here. We need to cut this aspect right here, and our ricasso was made by beautiful drill bits. These wheels, right, the flap wheels, and I'm not lying to you, the Harbor Freight ones are very good to be able to shape and particularly create the smooth aspect of this. Just remember, they're actually relatively cheap, so they turn this very quickly. But for $2-3, they're not bad. You get significant use out of them. Now, for the belly aspect, there's several ways of doing this, right? We can take a thin wheel and cut down recesses and then cut them at an angle. Or you can use one of these thick wheels to do it and just slowly grind away. Surprisingly, it's actually not very slow, and these are actually pretty cheap. I think that if you have the time, or more like the endurance to be able to do this, this is the best way to get that belly. So, just to show you guys, we definitely cut some grooves on there, matching the what this would be. And then we're going to cut angles. I'll show you. Obviously, you can definitely see this. It's not too eventful. I'm going to cut little angles, and right here, it's hot as shit. So we're going to cut this way, and then we'll have a little spike, and it's going to be much easier to grind down a spike than it's to grind down the whole wheel worth of the steel to remove it. We have used a thicker grinding wheel to get the bulk of the little teeth out. We'll continue to do that until we have the good profile, and where we marked our little holes, we'll drill it, and I'll show you how to drill. We're just filing away until the top kind of just makes contact with the side, and we have a good 90-degree bevel. We sadly cannot do this with the angle grinder because there's no way to actually keep proper contact. You get pretty close, but I'd rather use a file than anything else. So if you use a double mill bastard file, it'll get done relatively quickly. Naturally, you can see that it's pretty smooth already as it is, but we're gonna get the 90 degrees. Don't worry, I know our little choil was lost, but we will bring it back. Thus far, it's pretty good. We like it. We are getting through it, and now the bevel. The bevel is arguably probably the hardest part to make on the knife, right? Geometry, symmetry, having a little bit of tear out near the choil, transitions, etc. Could you freehand this with your angle grinder? Yes, absolutely. Will I freehand this? You will definitely need some water to be able to cool it out, but you can definitely tell that there's some unevenness, right? Definitely there, right there. The unevenness from the fact that that wheel is a wheel and not a flat surface. We will try to clean that up with a file, flattening it out and blending it in, but it won't overall affect. The other side is pretty ugly still. It won't affect the cutability, especially for our Harbor Freight knife. Another reason for leaving significant amount of meat is to avoid warping and breaking. One thing while making bevels, right? Bevels, right? Is you want to keep in mind symmetry. So you can see that pretty much it's pretty straight. And well, why didn't you go all the way to the edge, right? Why isn't it sharp? Well, what you want to do is not sharpen it all the way down. Whenever you quenching is a very aggressive process. If you were to take a razor blade, heat up to red hot and quench it, you'll see that it warps significantly. Metal still has memory nonetheless. So we want to leave some meat on there to be able to make any corrections. to our previous processee, etc. So let's say we quench, we have a somewhat of a warp after the tempering process. We will be able to correct it in the midst of grinding. So this is why we leave some meat on there. We are ready to make our holes, right? So whenever you're drilling through metal, you want to make sure that the drill bit catches. And the best way to do that is with a locating divot hole in the metal. Sometimes the metal will just kind of skate, or the drill bit would just kind of skate. I have this apparatus, which is, it's kind of cool, right? It makes a little divot. It's not the most efficient thing. What I prefer to do is I have a bunch of these woodworking screws, and you can even have these called self-tapper screws, right? And I like to hold them with a pair of needle nose pliers, and wherever I'm going to locate my screw, I hold them and I hit them with a hammer. Just to show you that I'm not shitting you, right? I don't even take the needle nose pliers, right? So there it almost goes. We know we want a lanyard hold, so I'm going to make my lanyard hold after the handle right here. Oh wait, let me show you. It works, and I'll even comparison. We want the other hole for the... It's not really visible, and it's nowhere near as visible as that very distinct nubbin. So, is it disposable and kind of wasteful? Yeah. Is it what I really do? Yeah. The cool thing about knife making is that later on you start looking at your design and you might change your mind. So originally we would have 2 pins and 1 lanyard hold. Well, now thinking about it, I might as well just have 1 pin and lanyard hold, and that's really it. So this one is how to drill through metal here. I use these bits called spider bits. They are much more resilient than the normal bits that you would normally find. Not only do you want to have a very secure vise placement, you could use clamps to be able to clamp it down in general. These spider bits, personally, and I'm not sponsored unless they want to sponsor me, are the best that I can possibly find around that break the least and are the most proficient at being able to drill through metal. We are drilling through annealed metal because we haven't tempered yet, so it shouldn't be too difficult. Now, we do not need a drill press to be able to drill through here, because once we drill through it, we're going to twist the drill a little bit and create some slop. When we create that slop, the pin will be able to easily fit through. Now, you're like, oh, well, what about the slop? But in reality, when, let's say this is a 7/16 drill bit, whenever I go to online and buy 7/16 stock raw to be able to make the pins, right? There is tolerances to such said stock whenever I get it online. A few thousandths of an inch will definitely make a difference whenever you are putting it through. And we can sand that away, or peen it away, or simply epoxy it away. So, another thing that I like to do, and this might not be common practice, I take one of these step bits and chamfer, if so, the holes to the next size up. Not all the way through, just chamfer them, just a little bit. Because sometimes, like I said, the stock pins might not fit all the way through, and epoxy will be able to fill it up. And it is just a nice little leeway that we will benefit from later on, just from experience. And as you see, it really isn't much, the chamfer wise. You can see that it's just a very bit. Looking back on earlier on this video, because it's a little hard to record while you're quenching, safety, etc. Right? We do know that we need to get this very hot, red hot, non-magnetic. We will then quench it in oil, not water this time, because we want a softer quench. We will then temper it at 400 degrees in an oven for 2 hours, or until the colors indicate proper tempering, which is usually like a hay, straw, golden color. Am I telling you this right now? It's, once again, very difficult to show while trying not to burn myself catch other things on fire or explain why these things need to happen very quickly. Another thing to keep in mind is that some people will just quench the very edge and the spine will be kept soft. I am not, and I am not a fan of that. And we could go on endless debate about why that is not the most effective way. It's cool for katanas, it's cool for some swords, but it's not cool for a bushcraft knife that needs to be hardened all the way through to be effective at its job. Let's turn off the forge for a second, right? And show you what we're doing here. Notice how we are not focusing on the very tip. The tip of the knife is usually where everything really breaks, right? We are focusing the fire on the handle, and later on we will turn the back burner of the forge to be able to focus on the tip, and then we will quench. Why are we doing it like this? The handle, theoretically speaking, is negligible when it comes to structural integrity in comparison to the tip. The tip is much smaller, has less material, is more prone to warping. We are still having the non-magnetic aspect of it, and this is what we're keeping in mind. Remember, the tip, it gets too hot. Nope, nothing. A little bit back in there for now. And the next morning, and well, it was pretty late at night, but you can see the knife right here, and it definitely hardened. So currently, right now, the next step will be tempering. There's a common misconception that when knives are at this state, that they will shatter like glass. They really won't shatter like glass. They are very brittle in comparison to a normal knife, and it's too hard. So what we're going to do is we're going to bake the knife at 400 degrees for 2 hours twice. I'll talk about this a little bit more, right? So let's say if you're making a throwing knife, right? You don't particularly want the hardness because of the constant impact of the knife hitting wood, etc., right? So you would temper it to 350 degrees, significantly lower. But since we want edge retention and still have some type of flexibility there too, we're doing 400. So 2 hours, 400 degrees. Once the 2 hours have elapsed, you will pull the knife out of the oven and let it just sit there. You do not put it in the, you do not leave it in the oven to cool down normally, because that might bring down the temper even further, and maybe you'll end up with a knife that's being tempered at 380, 370, and see, that's stuff you don't particularly want. Another thing that we're looking out for is the golden or hay color into it, and we can also take some files. There's little tester files to show us the ultimate Rockwell hardness of the knife, but we're not too worried about this. This is not super professional, right? So I personally do it in a little toaster oven. I'll show you in a second. Since I quenched in oil, you want to make sure the knife is clean, and obviously the crystalline structure that would form all the goop that would stay on the knife, you want to make sure it's clean. I'd recommend you do the same toaster oven aspect, because if you have a big oven, which most people do at home, the electricity is not going to be worth it. These toaster ovens are literally $20 at Walmart, and if you are getting into knife making, you will need something to be dedicated to that aspect. So my toaster oven was $20 at Walmart, and it literally lives outside and gets used for all sorts of little things like small powder coating and such. And I don't have to turn on the big oven inside my house. But if I had a big batch of knives, like let's say 100 knives, right, I would indeed use the oven inside, or send them out to get tempered, but I'd rather do it myself. So this is the little oven that I'm actually using. So where's the brand? Yeah, it's a Black & Decker Walmart oven. So have it here, and let's see what we're looking at. So we're still purple. I might do another cycle, because you can definitely see that there is some golden aspect forming, which is what we want to aim for. But this color is fine, and we should be able to move forward with this. This step forward, we want to make sure that if we are using any type of power tool, we are careful with it. And you're not going to be able to, this is not going to apply if you're using hand tools like files and stuff like that. But at this spot, you'll be starting destroying files, right? Because it's too hard. It's similar to the hardness of a file. So if you're using the end grinder like we were using earlier, we want to take breaks, use plenty of cold water, and make sure that whenever we have a satin finish or a metal looking finish, we're keeping in mind that if we see color start coming back to it, or burning the metal, that section of the knife is pretty much ruined because you have untempered that area. You got it way too hot, and that will be a weak spot and a point of failure. So I like to use these, right? I have an overabundance of these 300 grit pads, right? So I just put them on a piece of wood and maintain my angle and sand away. Obviously at 300 grit, I'm already almost done with the edge. First I was using 80 grit. Move progressively. I don't really care too much about the sides right now, but you can definitely see that we're making some progression here and getting all the, well, also we're here showing stuff, but that we're pretty thin right now. We're almost ready. I don't particularly care for the scanny grind. Scanny grind is looking good anyhow, and just gonna keep sanding until we get rid of those marks. And then the surface, I might kind of leave it rough since it's like a bushcraft knife, but then we're essentially ready for a handle. I'm gonna cut this video into 2 segments since a lot of people would just stop here and paracord wrap, but the video is pretty long in general already as we speak. They'll do a little cutting test, and yeah, to the point where I'm pretty much done because I'm gonna put a buffing wheel on this. But you can see that in the tip right here, I run into a little bit spot where I went a little low, but that's okay because imperfections make us perfect. But aside from that, we have our giant Mora for real. This is looking beefy. Same finish is gonna go here, particularly where we're gonna be gluing scales to it. This is the knife you grab and you're like, oh, is it really sharp? And then like you give yourself a bald spot. And so, I mean, just follow my OnlyFans. As you can see, it definitely is sharp. The geometry on it is very good. There's some little, spots where my grinding wasn't the best, but you can definitely make it. It's not difficult, or it's not impossible per se. There's a lot of work here to make something very useful that you can put out in the field. At this point, I'm going to stop polishing. There's a little coat of oil in here since I already started like testing it a little bit, and this is where the beautification stops, right? This is a work knife. Later on, we'll be putting the handle. I will split this video into 2 segments and genuinely see the interaction that happens here. If you'd like to see this video, please share it, subscribe it, etc. But this does take a lot of effort to edit. This is probably going to be 20-30 minutes, and it does take time to go through that and edit it myself. So if it only gets 100-200 views, it's not really my primary topic to go out of, but this might become a very successful series because I have 3 more Prybars that we can make it into other things like a buoy or a dagger, etc. So yeah, let me know if you would want to continue seeing these processes or processi, and I'll bring more to you. This will be for sale at some point or give to somebody. Check the eBay store, maybe it'll be there, I'm not sure. But thank you for watching. Definitely some aged wood here. I mean, this is the only testing that I really like to do. We might do some batoning. Nothing. Definitely still very good. Let's throw a little baton through it. Piece of wood here. This is a Brazilian cherry, so it's definitely very hard. I don't believe in batoning, but you guys love that shit. I mean, that's why I don't like batoning. It's kind of under-impressive, especially something with this geometry. Like, this is pretty well seasoned too, so it's been dry for quite a bit. You can definitely see the edge took no damage at all. I mean, yeah. What more testing would you really like?